Farizon. What's a Farizon? Well, it may sound like I'm saying horizon. I'm actually saying Farizon with an F. The electric commercial vehicle segment is finally starting to heat up in Australia as companies look to go green and are starting to invest in EVs. This has caught the attention of many brands, and the latest is yet another offshoot from Geely. This is the Chinese giant that owns brands such as Volvo, Polestar, Lotus, and others. This here is the Farizon SuperVan. It's an electric mid-sized commercial van that's only just arrived in Australia, and it is screaming for your attention. Is it any good? Let's check it out. The Farizon SuperVan is being offered in Australia in 3 trim levels. We have the entry-level, short wheelbase low roof here. Pricing for this variant is around $71,500 before on-road costs. It's worth noting this is for private buyers. If you're an ABN holder or are buying a fleet of supervans, pricing will likely be different. This is more affordable than electric vans from established nameplates like the Ford e-Transit Custom, Peugeot e-Expert and Volkswagen ID Buzz. The LDV eDeliver 7 is cheaper than the supervan however, especially for ABN buyers, but this van isn't built on a dedicated electric architecture and doesn't offer as much range. As standard, the supervan comes with a cargo partition, single sliding door, and rear barn doors that swing up to 270 degrees. Other niceties include LED headlights, a 7-inch digital instrument cluster, a 12.3-inch touchscreen multimedia system with wireless Apple CarPlay, a heated steering wheel as well as heated and ventilated synthetic leather seats. That's a fair bit for a commercial van. For the full specification details, read my detailed written review at carsguide.com.au. Take a look at this thing. How cool does it look? In a sea of bland white boxes on wheels, this stands out thanks in part to the amount of colours that it comes in. This blue in particular looks pretty sweet. Up front, it's pretty modern and futuristic with these bright LED headlights as well as the illuminated Farizon badge. This is complemented by the lack of a traditional grille, as it's an EV and it doesn't need it. Around the side, it's clear that this is a commercial van, but one that screams for your attention. I've had a lot of people turn their heads during my week of testing. This likely means that you wouldn't really need to put any branding on the side as it stands out enough on its own. In terms of the design, it's fairly slab-sided, which is no bad thing for a commercial van. The thing that stands out the most, however, are these aero covers for the steel wheels, which aren't to my personal tastes, but it makes the car look modern. At the back, you can see just how square the SuperVan is, which means it's all about practicality, and there's more on that later. It's kind of like the opposite of a mullet, where it's business at the back and a party at the front. Speaking of the front, it is pretty plush looking here at first glances. Having these synthetic leather seats as standard is pretty plush, and it's a treat, especially in what is usually a rugged and hard-wearing type of vehicle. I'm particularly a fan of these orange highlights as it breaks up the monotonous black finishes. There are clear commercial roots in this vehicle though, because so many of the finishes are hard and scratchy plastics. Next up, in terms of practicality, while this seat is pretty comfortable, I have had to compromise my driving position by scooting a fair way back and having the backrest pretty upright. The main reason for that is because the steering wheel doesn't offer reach adjustment, it's only tilt, which is a bit disappointing to see. Speaking of this seat though, I will go back to it and say that it offers heating and ventilation, which is pretty cool in a commercial van. Ahead of the driver, this steering wheel is heated and it's wrapped in a faux leather, which feels pretty plush for the car like this. The digital instrument cluster is a little on the small side, but it offers a bunch of different informative pages, including one that has the vehicle weight, which is pretty cool. Moving across, the touchscreen multimedia system is a little perhaps on the aftermarket side, I would say. It is pretty clear and crisp, and it also offers wireless Apple CarPlay, which is pretty cool to see. However, there is no Android Auto connectivity at all. Moving down, there are physical buttons for the climate controls, which is great to see, especially on the move. It's great to see car makers sticking with physical buttons for this, because so many are now integrating them into the touchscreen. Looking elsewhere around the cabin, there is a little bit of storage, but it's not fantastic. There's a little drawer here that you can pull out with some cup holders and a little bit of storage, as well as this extra little section down here to stow things. There is a USB-A port, a USB-C port, as well as a 12-volt socket. Last thing that I'll mention here up front is this car is only offered with a 2-seat configuration with 2 separate seats. While it is nice having a driver's seat with an armrest, it would be nice if there was a 3-seat configuration to maximize the capability of this car. As standard, there is a single sliding door here on the curbside that opens just like this. It allows you to get things in and out with ease. Unfortunately, however, there is no sliding door on the driver's side as an option at all. As standard, there's a plastic partition to make sure nothing hits you while you're driving. And something that you might note when I open this front passenger door is there's no B-pillar, which is the main benefit of this car being built on a dedicated electric architecture. Another thing this means as well is for the front passenger seat, the seatbelt is here on the door. It's worth noting that this is the low roof version of the SuperVan. Critically, that means that you should be able to fit in many multi-storey car parks, as it's under 2 meters tall. At the back here, there are 2 barn doors that open just like this, and they have stops that open at 90, 180, and go all the way up to 270 degrees. The load area is very generous. Something that I like in particular is the load lip. Given that this is based on a dedicated electric architecture, it means that the load lip can be as low as possible. This also means you can get things in and out with ease. In terms of amenities, there are a few tie-down points as well as 3 domestic power point sockets with vehicle to load. There's also a spare wheel under the floor. Power in the SuperVan comes from a single front-mounted electric motor that produces 170 kilowatts of power and 336 newton meters of torque. This is fed from an 83 kilowatt hour LFP battery sourced from Chinese battery supplier Cattle. Farizon doesn't quote a 0 to 100 km/h sprint time for the SuperVan, though top speed is claimed to be 135 km/h. Claimed range for the SuperVan depends on the body configuration, but it's up to 376 kilometers according to WLTP testing and the short wheelbase low roof style, which is what we have here. The battery pack can be DC fast charged at rates up to 140 kilowatts, which would see the battery charge from 20 to 80% in 36 minutes. The battery pack can also be AC charged at rates up to 11 kilowatts, which would see the battery charge from 15 to 100% in 7 hours. The SuperVan also offers vehicle to load through Australian domestic household plugs at up to 3.3 kilowatts of continuous power. This allows you to use the van's battery pack to power appliances, tools, or other emergency backup systems. Farizon doesn't quote an official energy consumption figure for the SuperVan, though during my unladen testing I saw 23.5 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which would give a theoretical range of 350 kilometers. This would likely drop with a heavier load on board. Alrighty, we're behind the wheel of the Farizon SuperVan, and I just want to get this out of the way first up. You're probably going to hear a fair few chimes throughout this video of multiple different volumes and different levels. That's because there are multiple different safety systems that chime. The most notable include the speed limit assist, the driver attention monitoring, as well as the lane keep assist. All of them have different chimes and intensities. Thankfully, Farizon is working on a fix for this via a software update, where it aims to reduce the chime volume by up to 20 decibels. Yes, that's right, 20 decibels. Something else you might note and hear throughout this clip is the electric motor whine. Under 25 kilometers an hour, there is a noise that it emits. It is quite loud here from the cabin, and it's even louder on the outside. But once you get beyond this threshold, the electric motor is honestly one of the loudest I have ever heard. It's just a really high-pitched frequency that just drives you a little bit crazy after a while. The electric motor itself, however, is completely fine in terms of the power it produces. In fact, for a van that's over 2 tons, it's pretty sufficient. If you load it up with more weight, it still feels maybe a little bit on the sluggish side, but it's never not enough to get this van moving because there's plenty of torque on tap. There are 3 drive modes to select from, and I've found the most natural is the standard, though when you cycle through normal, sport and eco, there is a big loud bong that plays and it makes me laugh every single time. There are also 3 levels of regen braking, and I've found the most natural to be number 1, which is the least intensive, because it's either on or completely off, which makes for the driving experience to be a little bit jerky. Unlike some EVs, however, when the transition happens from regen braking to traditional friction brakes, it's completely fine. There is no awkward pause. It's worth noting that this van does not have a one-pedal driving mode at all. For all of the regen modes, you have to use the brake pedal to come to a complete stop. With the steering, it is an electric system that has 2 different modes you can select from. I prefer the Comfort because it's nice and light and it's easy to toss this car around. Although in saying that, it isn't necessarily the most feel I've ever had through a steering wheel. It is quite artificial. On the suspension front, you need to remember that this is a commercial van. It has leaf suspension at the back, which is best for load carrying, and you can certainly feel that when the car is unladen. There is a fair bit happening and you do get thrown about a little bit. This is a little bit confusing, however, because the wheels are quite small and the tyres are quite chunky. Although in saying that, the tyre pressures as standard are very high. The rear tyres in particular, when you're at GVM, needs to be at 68 PSI, which is really high. In terms of grip, you need to remember that this is a front-wheel drive car, and generally it's quite fine, though if you do mash the accelerator, you can get the front wheels to slip just a bit. Around town traction is no issue, however. The Gitti tyres do a good job, although it is a different brand name that I've only seen on a few cars, however, including the BYD Atto 3 when it first arrived in Australia. For parking, this is one big beast, even though it is the smallest version of the SuperVan. There are front and rear parking sensors as standard, as well as a surround view camera, which is great to see in a commercial van. It does have a very high quality, although when you start moving, the camera can get quite stuttery. This car does have a very small turning circle, and that's credit to this car being built on a dedicated electric architecture. Because of that skateboard architecture, it allows the wheels to have as much freedom as possible when turning. In saying this though, you can't really escape that this is such a big van. You will have to do 3-point turns at some point. It's almost inevitable. In terms of visibility, it's honestly quite good. The windscreen is humongous and rather raked, so it gets a very clear view ahead. And then if you look over the side, it's very good as well, thanks to these bigger sections at the front here. There aren't many blind spots. Speaking of blind spots though, it is a van and there are no windows out the side. So if you're doing over the shoulder checks, it's very hard. And there's only 2 very small windows out the back, and there's also one here in the cabin. So looking out the back, it's virtually impossible. Lastly, in terms of NVH, which stands for noise, vibration, and harshness, as I spoke about before, there are so many bings and bongs in this car, and the electric motor is so loud. Beyond this though, the cabin is pretty quiet if you can get over your keys jangling around when they're going over with the suspension. It seems the cabin is screwed together quite nicely, which speaks well to long-term reliability on that front. Overall, from a driving perspective, this is far from the best in the segment. A lot of the other vans honestly feel like a car to drive, and this still certainly feels like a van or a ute. It's not what I was expecting for a car that looks so futuristic and cool. The Farizon SuperVan hasn't been crash tested by ANCAP just yet. However, it was awarded a 5-star rating by Euro NCAP earlier this year. As standard, there's autonomous emergency braking, lane keep assist, adaptive cruise control, traffic sign recognition, a driver monitoring system, a surround view camera, as well as front and rear parking sensors. This is a high level of safety kit, especially for a commercial van. But as mentioned before, a lot of the safety systems are rather intrusive and have obnoxiously loud chimes. Thankfully, Farizon is currently working on a software fix for this. For the full safety details, read my detailed written review at carsguide.com.au. On the ownership front, the Farizon SuperVan is covered by a 5-year 200,000 kilometre warranty, while the high voltage battery pack is covered for 8 years or 200,000 kilometres. There's also 5 years of complimentary roadside assistance. Logbook servicing is required every 12 months or 30,000 kilometres, which is relatively standard for commercial vehicles. The first 5 services are capped and all up cost $2,730. This averages out to around $550 per service, which isn't too bad in the grand scheme, as diesel vans can be much more expensive to maintain in the long term. With cool looks and a stacked equipment list, this is great for first impressions, but it's clear that Farizon still has a fair way to go with the SuperVan. I can excuse the less than ideal driving position as well as the mediocre cabin storage, but having an electric motor that whines this much and safety systems that are this overbearing makes for an infuriating driving experience. Any electric van from any other mainstream established brand such as Volkswagen, Peugeot are much easier to live with day to day. Hopefully these future software updates that Farizon is working on will fix some of these issues, but it begs the question, why wasn't it good in the first place? Thank you for watching. For more and to read my detailed written review, head to carsguide.com.au.